All right, buckle up, everybody, because we're diving deep into some seriously crazy winter weather that's heading your way. And we're not just talking about a little snow. We're talking potential power outages, treacherous travel, and yeah, maybe even some severe weather down south. So we've got the forecast, we've got the maps, and we've got expert analysis all lined up to help you understand exactly what is coming.
Well, what's really interesting here is the setup. It's not just one weather system, it's this whole chain of events that could lead to a pretty historic ice storm.
An ice storm. You've got my attention.
Right.
So let's start with what's happening right now before we get to the main event. What's the current weather situation looking like?
Well, the Northeast is still kind of shaking off that recent system, but things are already brewing in the Ohio Valley. And that activity there is expected to bring snow pretty far south, reaching even Washington, D.C. And then you've got some serious lake effect snow predicted near Lakes Ontario and Erie, which could pile up pretty quickly. Meanwhile, the West Coast is getting hit with a double whammy of rain and snow, especially in the Pacific Northwest and California.
So it sounds like nobody is getting a break from this wild weather. But let's get back to that ice storm you mentioned. Where are we expecting the biggest impact from that?
Well, a huge area from Kansas and Nebraska all the way to Kentucky and Indiana is under a winter storm watch. And these watches are very likely to be upgraded to warnings as we get closer and probably expanding eastward, too. You've also got winter weather advisories stretching from Kansas to Ohio, Pennsylvania, and even D.C. So yeah, this is shaping up to be a pretty significant event.
Okay, so we're talking potential power outages with this, right?
Right.
What kind of ice accumulation are we looking at that could cause those kinds of issues?
The models are showing a high probability, like over 95% in some areas, of at least 1/10 of an inch of ice accumulation. And that might not sound like much, but it's enough to weigh down power lines and tree branches, potentially leading to widespread outages. And we're talking, just outside of Kansas City, through southern Illinois, south of St. Louis, and even into Kentucky.
So basically right through the heartland. That's pretty concerning. What makes this particular ice storm so unique or potentially historic, as you called it?
Well, the European model is painting a really interesting picture here. It's showing a sharp divide in ice accumulation just south of Kansas City. We could see over 1/2 inch of ice in eastern Kansas and western Missouri, but just 25-30 miles south, it drops to 1/10 of an inch or less.
Wow.
That small difference in geography could mean the difference between widespread power outages and, minimal impact. St. Louis, on the other hand, is likely looking at least 1/10 of an inch, if not over 1/4 inch of ice.
So location is everything with this storm. And what about the Ohio Valley? They're often hit hard by winter weather. What's the forecast looking like there?
The Ohio Valley is also bracing for significant ice accumulation. We could see up to 1/2 inch in southeastern Missouri, and that much ice can really shut down travel for hours, if not days. And even smaller amounts of ice, like what's predicted for Tennessee and the Appalachian Mountains, can make the roads treacherous. It really highlights how important those road treatments are. But even with treatment, extreme caution is advised.
Yikes. 1/2 inch of ice. That's enough to make anyone nervous.
Yeah.
But you mentioned this whole system kicks off with snow first, right? When and where should people expect that to start?
Right. The snow comes first. We're expecting light to moderate snowfall to start across Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, moving toward D.C. by Saturday afternoon. And we're probably looking at a few inches of accumulation there, maybe up to 4 or 5 in some spots.
So not a huge amount of snow initially, but then things get really interesting as that main storm rolls in. When does that hit? And what can people expect?
The main event starts early Saturday morning with light rain, freezing rain, or snow, just depending on the location. And even that light precipitation could make roads slippery, especially in Kansas and Nebraska, where we could see ice accumulation on untreated roads right off the bat. But that's just the beginning. That initial light freezing rain is going to intensify into a potent mix of heavy rain, freezing rain, and snow across Kansas, Missouri, and Illinois by Sunday morning. And that corridor, folks, is where we're anticipating the heaviest snowfall, possibly even blizzard conditions.
Blizzard conditions. Wow. Things are escalating quickly. And I understand Sunday also brings a threat of severe weather further south. What's going on there?
Yeah. While all that snow and ice is hitting the Midwest, we're expecting a burst of severe weather down in Louisiana and southwestern Tennessee by Sunday lunchtime. We could see damaging winds, hail, and even the possibility of tornadoes.
So we've got winter weather and potential tornadoes all happening on the same day. Now that's a wild weather whiplash. And I understand the heavy snow continues to push eastward as well.
Right.
Where will that be impacting by Sunday night?
That's right.
Yeah.
By Sunday night, that heavy snow will be blanketing Kentucky, Virginia, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, you name it. And right in the middle of all that snow, you've got freezing rain, too. It's a recipe for power outages and travel nightmares. Plus, we could see a squall line with even more severe weather ripping through the Dixie Alley. That means the freezing rain continues its icy grip on northern Kentucky and West Virginia, and several states get slammed with even more heavy snow. It's almost relentless.
Okay, so Sunday is definitely the day to hunker down and stay safe. But what about the East Coast? When does that heavy snow finally reach them?
By Monday morning, that heavy snow will have reached the East Coast. D.C., New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, you're all in the line of fire. And the Storm Prediction Center has also issued a severe weather risk for Sunday in the lower Mississippi Valley, which could expand eastward, bringing strong winds and even more potential for isolated tornadoes.
Wow, this storm is really packing a punch. And speaking of packing a punch, let's talk about those snowfall predictions. How much snow are we actually expecting in some of these areas?
Well, the GFS model, which is known for its accuracy in these types of situations, is showing a high probability, like almost 100%, of over 4 inches of snowfall in a 24-hour period in central Illinois and northern Missouri, and over 80% probability in parts of the Ohio Valley.
4 inches is no joke, especially when you consider the potential for ice on top of that. But what about the areas expecting the heaviest snowfall? What are we talking about there?
The potential snowfall amounts range from 5 to 13 inches across Kansas City, St. Louis, and southern Illinois, with some areas potentially exceeding 13 to 15 inches. And get this, some isolated spots could see nearly 2 feet of snow.
2 feet. Okay, that's officially hunker down and bake cookies level of snow.
Yeah.
But, sometimes even with a lot of snow, people try to go about their business. But with this ice storm, it sounds like that's just not going to be possible for many.
You're absolutely right. The ice is what's really going to make this storm so disruptive, and the timing couldn't be worse.
What do you mean?
Well, this ice storm is expected to hit on Sunday and Monday, right when people are trying to get back to their routines after the holidays. Imagine trying to get to work or school with a half an inch of ice on the roads. It's just not safe. And for those who lose power, it could mean days without heat in the middle of winter.
You're painting a pretty bleak picture here. What can people do to prepare for this level of disruption?
Now is the time to take action. Make sure you have a plan in place. Stock up on essential supplies like food, water, and medications. Check your heating systems and winterize your vehicles. And most importantly, stay informed about the latest weather updates.
Great advice. And remember, even if you think you can handle a bit of snow and ice, the potential for power outages and extreme cold makes this storm especially dangerous.
Exactly. Check on your neighbors, especially the elderly or those with health conditions. A little community support can go a long way during an event like this.
Okay, so we've covered the snow, the ice, and even the potential for tornadoes. But you mentioned there's another piece to this whole weather saga, right? Something about a historic cold snap following this storm.
You got it. And that's what we're going to dive into next. This storm is just the beginning. Get ready for a deep freeze that could break records. So we've talked about the snow and the ice and even that potential for severe weather, but this winter wallop isn't quite done with us yet. After that storm passes, be prepared for a truly historic cold snap. And we're talking weeks of below average temperatures.
Hold on, so it's not enough to get slammed with snow and ice and maybe even tornadoes. Now we have to face an Arctic blast on top of it all.
It's a 1-2 punch for sure. And there's even a chance of another winter weather event in the Southern Plains around January 8th to 10th.
Another one? Are
Okay.
you kidding me? What could possibly come next after all this?
Well, the models are showing a southward dip in the jet stream, which could open the door for Pacific moisture to surge into the area. It's still uncertain, but if it happens, we could see snow and freezing rain in Texas, Louisiana, and the Dixie Alley.
So this winter is really bringing its A game. But let's focus on the cold snap for now. You mentioned it could be historic. Just how cold are we talking?
Arctic air is going to sweep down from Canada right after the winter storm, engulfing the Great Plains, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley. And by January 7th or 8th, we're looking at temperatures that could be a staggering 30 to 40 degrees below average in some areas.
30 to 40 degrees below average. That's insane. I'm starting to shiver just thinking about it. And how long is this cold air mass supposed to stick around?
This isn't a quick cold snap. It's going to settle in for a while, and it could potentially shift to the East Coast, the Southern and Central Plains, or even the Four Corners states by the following weekend.
So no escaping this deep freeze. Wow, this is shaping up to be quite a winter. What exactly does this level of cold mean for people in these areas, besides bundling up, obviously?
Well, for starters, temperatures this low can pose a real threat to infrastructure. Water pipes can freeze and burst, leading to costly repairs, and power grids can get overloaded as people crank up their heating systems, potentially leading to more outages.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We always hear about those things happening in extreme cold.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the impact on people's health, besides the obvious risks of frostbite and hypothermia?
Prolonged exposure to extreme cold can weaken the immune system, making people more susceptible to illnesses like colds and the flu. It can also exacerbate existing health conditions, especially respiratory problems like asthma. And for those without proper shelter, these temperatures can be life-threatening.
This is all starting to sound pretty dire. Is there anything positive about this cold snap? Or is it just all bad news?
Well, every cloud has a silver lining, right? On a lighter note, for those who enjoy winter sports, this could be the perfect opportunity to hit the slopes or go ice skating.
Okay, so maybe we can enjoy the view from the warmth and safety of our homes. But seriously, for those who are concerned about the potential impact of this cold, what steps can they take to prepare?
It's all about being proactive. Make sure your home is properly insulated, check your heating system to make sure it's in good working order, and stock up on blankets and warm clothing. Also, be sure to have a plan in place in case you do lose power. That means having alternative heating sources like a fireplace or space heater and knowing how to use them safely. And don't forget about your pets. They need extra care during cold weather, too.
Great advice. It sounds like preparation is key to weathering this storm, both literally and figuratively. But before we wrap up, let's zoom out a bit. You mentioned there's a chance of yet another winter weather event in the southern plains around January 8th to 10th. Are we talking about a repeat of the snow and ice or something different?
It's still a bit early to say for sure, but the models are hinting at the potential for snow and freezing rain in Texas, Louisiana, and the Dixie Valley. So basically, another round of winter weather misery for those areas that are already bracing for this first storm. And this potential event is tied to another interesting phenomenon, a possible southward dip in the jet stream that could funnel Pacific moisture into the region.
Pacific moisture in the middle of winter. Isn't that unusual? What's going on with the jet stream that's causing all this wild weather?
The jet stream is this fast-flowing air current high in the atmosphere that acts like a giant river of wind, separating cold air to the north from warm air to the south. It typically flows in a fairly predictable west-to-east pattern, but sometimes it can develop these big meanders or dips that allow cold air to plunge southward or warm air to surge northward. And that's what we're seeing with this potential event in the southern plains. A southward dip in the jet stream could allow cold air to spill all the way down to the Gulf Coast, bringing snow and freezing rain to areas that rarely see those conditions.
That's fascinating. So basically, the jet stream is like the conductor of the weather orchestra. And right now, it's playing a pretty chaotic symphony.
That's a great analogy. And this particular symphony is having quite an impact on the entire country. But back to the potential event in the southern plains. What's interesting is that this could bring snow and freezing rain to areas that are more accustomed to dealing with hurricanes and heat waves. This is going to test their infrastructure and emergency preparedness in a whole new way.
Absolutely. They may have hurricane evacuation plans, but do they have snow plows and salt trucks? Does their power grid hold up in freezing temperatures? These are all important questions that communities in the South will need to consider as this potential event unfolds.
And it also highlights how interconnected these weather patterns are. The jet stream doesn't just impact one region in isolation, it can create a chain reaction across the entire country, bringing unusual weather to unexpected places.
Okay, so we've got this massive winter storm bearing down on us, followed by a historic cold snap, and then potentially another round of winter weather in the South. It's a lot to take in. What's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember from all of this?
The key takeaway is simple. Be prepared. This winter is not messing around. It's bringing a triple threat of snow, ice, and extreme cold. Now is the time to take action, make a plan, and stay informed.
Great advice. We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on all of these developing weather events and bring you the latest updates as they unfold. But for now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the potential long-term impacts of this extreme weather. Because even after the snow melts and the temperatures warm up, there can be some lingering consequences. So we talked about the immediate threats of this crazy winter weather, the snow, the ice, the potential for tornadoes, and that bone-chilling cold snap. But what about the aftermath? What kind of long-term impacts could we be looking at?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's something we don't always think about when a big storm hits. The obvious impacts are things like power outages and travel disruptions, school closures. but the ripple effects can be felt for weeks or even months after that initial event.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. What are some of those ripple effects we could see?
Well, for starters, businesses could suffer some significant losses due to closures, supply chain disruptions, and damage to property. And for industries that rely on transportation, like agriculture or manufacturing, those disruptions can have cascading effects on the economy as a whole.
That makes sense. A few days of closed roads and airports can really throw a wrench in the whole system. What about the impact on agriculture specifically? This storm is hitting right in the heart of farm country.
Exactly. And the timing couldn't be worse for farmers who are already dealing with the challenges of a changing climate. This storm could damage crops, delay planting, and even kill livestock. And those losses can translate into higher food prices for everyone down the road.
So not just an economic impact, but a potential impact on our food supply as well. What about the environment? Are there any long-term consequences we should be thinking about for ecosystems?
Oh, definitely. Heavy snowfall can lead to flooding as it melts, which can contaminate water sources and damage habitats. And that extreme cold can stress wildlife populations, especially those that aren't adapted to those frigid temperatures.
It's crazy how interconnected everything is. From the jet stream to the economy to the environment, it really highlights these far-reaching consequences of these kinds of extreme weather events.
It really does, and it underscores the need for resilience and preparedness, not just at the individual level, but also at the community and national levels. We need to be thinking about how to mitigate the impacts of these events, both in the short term and in the long term.
Okay, so a lot to consider here, but let's try to end on a slightly more hopeful note. Is there anything we can learn from these extreme weather events? Anything that can help us to better prepare for the future?
Oh, absolutely. Each storm provides valuable data and insights that can improve forecasting models and emergency response plans. It also gives us a glimpse into the potential impacts of climate change, which is expected to bring more frequent and intense weather events in the future.
So it's a wake-up call, in a way. A reminder that we need to be proactive in addressing climate change and building a more resilient society.
Exactly. And it's also a reminder that we're all in this together. We need to support each other, prepare as best we can, and learn from these experiences so we can be better equipped to face whatever challenges the future holds.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive. We covered a lot of ground, from the immediate threats of this winter storm to the potential long-term impacts. It's a lot to process, but the key takeaway is clear. Be prepared, stay safe, and let's all work together to weather the storm, both literally and figuratively.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Stay warm out there, everyone.
And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic you're sure to find fascinating. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.